Sharmin, welcome aboard to the show. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Well, thank you for having me. I'm super excited.
So, most of our guests are in the US, but I think you must be definitely our first guest from Singapore. So, first, I want to take the opportunity to kind of share some more information with our audience about Singapore. What was it like growing up in Singapore? How is it different from the US? And what's really interesting about Singapore, it went through a lot of change in the last, I would say, 20 to 30 years. So, I'd
hmm
love if you could kind of talk about that as well.
well, I've spent the longest period of time in my life in Singapore, but actually I didn't grow up here. I've been here for 18 years. So I've seen the massive change. If you think about it, Singapore is only 60 years old. They just celebrated their 60th anniversary. So it's a very young country. It went from being looking like a little village to being this massive city, which is like the global hub for all of Asia. What I love about Singapore is that it's safe, it's ease of doing business, and it is such a melting pot of different nationalities. They're putting a lot of emphasis on technology, startups. The government is investing huge in that space, especially in AI. The other thing I like is that the government here, they think 50 years ahead. So every plan that they make, they're like, what's going to happen in 50 years? I came here thinking I'm just going to have another expat package, and I ended up staying here for 18 years. So I guess I'm still loving it.
I think what's absolutely beautiful is that if you kind of look at the history of Singapore, every 10 years, more or less, they've made radical change from a
Yeah,
port city to manufacturing, from manufacturing to early kind of basic technology to the incredible, really technological advanced state it is today.
yeah,
That is amazing, right? Every decade to make such strides is really something unique.
yeah.
There were strict laws that were put in place to kind of increase the cleanliness, like incredible changes in such a short amount of
Yeah.
time. To me, this has always been amazing. Do you have any explanation in what has kind of driven this incredibly fast pace of accelerated innovation and progress?
Well, first of all, they hire very smart people. I don't know if you know, but in my cohort, we had Pei Ling, and she is now a member of the parliament. What they do is they take bright young people. They don't want to have an exodus of smart people leaving the country.
Yeah.
They said, we will finance your education as long as you commit to 5 years afterwards. And after that, they get hooked. They want to do stuff.
Yeah.
Pei Ling is now all over the news. She's doing amazing stuff. The second thing is, the way they pay the political people here, it's more than what is paid to the US government. I mean, a finance minister here earns more than the president of the US. There's no reason to have corruption. All they want to do is like think ahead and see how they can improve. I
And
know.
Singapore actually headhunted people from all over the world. So Singapore basically said,
Exactly.
we're going to find the smartest people and we're going to
Yeah.
bring them to teach in our universities. Amazing strategies, brilliant ideas. I just fell in love with all things Singapore. I just stayed over for a day and if you come over, you have a long layover, for free, they'll bring you into the city and show you everything.
Yeah.
Absolutely brilliant. So I learned a lot about its history. What's driving this? Is it the people? Is it the culture? What's making this kind of innovation?
Well, it's a combination of things. If you think about it, and I'll come back to that, they don't actually grow anything here. It's a very small country. You can go around all of Singapore in like 45 minutes. They actually don't have anything that they export. So the biggest export here is technology, the mines and IP. So they've been very smart. They've given money to the likes of Google, Microsoft, and every to build their regional headquarters here. That's number one. The second one is that they're investing heavily in IP. So any sort of, there's a lot of IP lawyers here. So anything that comes out of Singapore is like, oh, it's a Singapore unicorn or it's a Singapore something. Because what else can they export? They don't have food. They don't have, anything else that they really manufacture. They don't have the space. So they want to differentiate themselves in the fact that we are smart people that is in the forefront of technology and we have ease of doing business. Now, when I was working for the New Zealand government, a lot of the New Zealand companies would come here for really three things: ease of doing business. You can open a bank account, no problem, low corruption, and everyone here speaks English, as opposed to Indonesia, Malaysia, Korea, and Japan. You're speaking the same language, so why not make it that? And as I mentioned, now they're thinking during COVID, what happened was there was a shortage of food. So they've put a new plan in place saying that by 2050, Singapore is going to be, producing 30% of the food for the country, which is massive because right now they import everything. So they have invested heavily in agri-tech and vertical farming. So every time they think Singapore can't have it, they're like, no, let's find a solution in which we can actually grow our infrastructure to cater to our people. So if COVID happens again, we will not be in a space where, we don't have enough food for our nation. I mean, I can go on and on again with the stuff that they're doing, but they have invested 1.2 billion in the AI infrastructure. Now, they are not the fastest to adopt. They are fast followers because they put strict laws and governance into place. If you look at some places where they've moved really fast, but then they've had cyber attacks. They've had people hacking into so many things. Here, they're like, no, no. Yes, we want to have blockchain. Yes, we want to have AI, but let's think through the safety of our people. You can't just have a fintech coming into here and saying, we will do payments. They're like, oh, no, hang on. We have to educate the people before they get into this investing platform so they are aware of all the risks. So they really go, it's not just about feeling safe here. They really go out of their way to make sure that the people here are safe and protected in many different ways.
That's absolutely brilliant. So you are heavily involved in the entrepreneurial startup community. How does it differ from the US? What does it feel like? Kind of bring us right there with you.
So I spent actually 2 weeks in Silicon Valley where I was working for NZT. And, one of the things I like here is, and maybe it's just a personal thing, is that, when I work here with entrepreneurs, I am a big fish in a small pond. In the US, I'm a small fish, if you know what I mean. There's so many startups there. The market is so saturated, so many VCs. Yes, you can probably scale faster. Yes, you probably get money faster, but there's so many people that have let down VCs. If you look at WeWork and what happened with SoftBank, yeah, brilliant idea, and he sold it. And then what happened? The same thing with Theranos, right? But here they go through immense due diligence. Yes, there is money here. There's private wealth here. It takes a little bit longer, but once you do get into the space, it goes through it goes through something that is actually solid. Also, what I find that when people are here, they're much more willing to collaborate and, they are willing to sort of work with many different entities. The biggest part here is that the Singapore government gives a lot of funding. I
Hmm.
think that's what's different from the US. I don't know in detail, and maybe you can correct me if I'm wrong. But when companies come here and set up a subsidiary, you don't even have to have the company. You set up a subsidiary, it opens you up to so many different kinds of Singapore funding because they want, with of course the criteria that you hire local people
Right.
here, that you sort of you bring up the country as a whole and all these other things. So I thought that if I'm in the entrepreneur space, I'd probably run out of opportunities. But every time I talk to different entrepreneurs, there's new things in which they are scaling and moving. And really, Singapore is not a country where you can just have an idea and think, I'm going to be like the US. They come here and then they look how they can expand into the rest of Southeast Asia. This is just a testing ground or a place or a sandbox. Once they get it right, it opens up doors for Indonesia, Malaysia, Vietnam, and other places. And of course, you have the credibility. I could do it in Singapore. I got funding from the Singapore government. So, why not do it somewhere else?
Brilliant. And I have heard many times the expression that Singapore is almost the jumping bedrock to the rest of Asia. It's well kind of accepted in many entrepreneurship and business circles. Very true. And the talent that I've met has always been quite incredible. I've got some good friends that even though we were in China with a previous company of mine, Mentor Graphics, the team lead was from Singapore, and I had such a immense respect to him. I want to hear a little bit about what you're doing today in the entrepreneurial environment. Not so long ago, you started as a city leader for Founder Live Singapore, and you're just immersed in entrepreneurship, mentoring across the board. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, sure. So I had the first Founders Live event last month in October. There was actually 5 founders that signed up, but one of them, she had to leave because of some personal problems. I was quite surprised because I didn't actively market it. I just created an Eventbrite, and then within 2 weeks, I had 5 founders sign up, and the rest were on waiting list. And these are all varied, but interestingly, and why I love this is all of them have an element of AI, from agri-tech to for your mental health to fitness. So that was amazing. They had to pitch in 99 seconds, and you got voted and you got crowdfunded by the audience. So it is instantaneous validation if your idea makes sound, which you had to do it in 99 seconds. And if someone liked your idea, they could crowdfund it. Now, how did I come across this? So I got approached by Nick, who is the CEO of Founders Life in Seattle. And he knows that I'm quite involved in the tech community here. I do mentorship, not just for the German Accelerator, but also for NUS, Women in Business, and for NUS Entrepreneurship Society. And I've been a couple of times a judge for a lot of these things called Switch, which is the Singapore Week of Innovation. And he said, look, you're part of an accelerator. You've been a judge. Here, let me sort of present to you another option in which you can give founders, without being attached to any of these things, a chance to have a platform to pitch. But we make it a little bit more interesting. They have to pitch it in 99 seconds, get their value proposition out, and they get instant validation. What do you think? I'm like, wow, that sounds amazing. Of course. So I wasn't sure how the idea was going to pan out, but we had about like 65 people turn up, 5 founders, an amazing night, and they can't wait for the next one, which is going to be in January. But as I mentioned, what was surprising for me was there was 5 founders, 4 of them females, all of them in the AI space. So, that sort of shows you that, this is where Singapore is going. And interestingly, only one of them was from Singapore and the rest were all expats. So again, it shows that it's a big melting pot. In terms of like mentorship, what I like about this is that a lot of the people coming here are coachable. They don't come with a fixed mindset and say that I've got my product and my service and I don't want to hear anything else. Just give me some leads. They're like, okay, tell us how we can customize to the audience here. Or how do you think we should bring down the price point? Or how should we work with the different partners that we have here? So, as opposed to working for big companies, what I love about working with startups and scale up is that I can have an immediate and long or short-term effect with them. When I was working at KPMG and Deloitte, I was a small cog in a big machine and there was so much stuff going on. I didn't really see the effect that I had in some of these companies. And also when you work with big enterprises, you see the effect much later. With startups, it's very fast moving. You sort of help them with a POC or something and you can see the effect immediately. I work with companies which is a 10-man team and go up to IPO in 2 years. So for me, the satisfaction is huge. Yes, the money is not great, but if I love what I'm doing, I think it goes a long way.
Yeah, I don't know anybody that money has made them happy. In some cases,
No,
it's been quite the opposite, that money has made them even more unhappy. So I wouldn't cry about enjoying what you do, if you're really enjoying it. So I think that's absolutely wonderful. I appreciate it. I got to tell you, I stepped away from a few, lucrative opportunities to do the things that I love as well. So we're definitely like-minded in that perspective. So
absolutely.
So 99 seconds, that's novel. How do you convey value or convince an audience of 60 people in 99 seconds? Do you coach the
Yeah.
tell us about this. This is really interesting.
So I have a little bit of background in pitching. When I work with the New Zealand startups, I help them with something. It's actually literally an elevator pitch. So they would get to the top and then they would have to convince a bunch of CEOs and VCs in that elevator, which would come down in 1.5 minutes, which is more or less like 99 seconds on how to pitch. So it was a combination of storytelling. What's your value proposition? What problem are you solving? And that's it. And it is actually 99 seconds is doable. So I get on a call with the founders. They go through it. And when you realize and you write it down, there's a lot of but here, this, that. You don't have to talk about valuations, how you're going to make money. You have to say that this is the biggest problem. These are the numbers, and I am going to address this problem and solve it in this way. And that's all you have to do. And why are you going to solve it? So how is the founder capable of solving this? And that's what they look at. I've got a background in A, B, C. I've done this, and I know I can do this. And that's all it takes, right? To give you an example, Eduardo, the gentleman who won the last one, he comes from a background. He's done so many marathons. He's so much about clean food and eating. And he was trying to find, because you have to, when you're doing all this workout, you need to have a lot of protein in your system, but people get sick of having chicken breast and steak. So he worked with a chef. He worked in Vietnam and other places to come up with snacks that actually give you a lot of protein. And instead of meat, he looks at plant protein, which is also quite difficult to do. And then in each one of his snacks, there's about something like 25 grams of protein. So instead of having a shake, you could just have a snack and that's it. And when he pitched it, he goes, look at me. I was working out. So he made it personal. He told a
Oh,
story and people actually relate more to stories. So when I work with the founders, I said, make it personal. Tell them a story. Put some emotion in there because then they will remember you, and give some examples. So at the end of that, he goes, you see the snack? Try it afterwards. So each one of them had something to give afterwards. They told a
nice.
story. They made it convincing and they touched upon an emotion, because people buy on emotion. They remember some of the rational facts, And the other thing about this 99 seconds was they started strong and they ended strong. People don't remember what happens in between. They remember the beginning and the end. So yeah, sometimes I've had to work up to an hour with some of these founders, but before they get on the 99 seconds, I work between 15 minutes. Like Eduardo was really good. I only had to work with him for 15 minutes. Others, I work up to an hour, and we go through the pitch at least 4 or 5 times. I record them to see what they sound like. And then I sort of help them narrow it down. And it's worked. All of them managed to finish on time, and they were so happy. They're like, no one's worked with us like this. So yeah, and it gives them a lot of confidence that I can get my value proposition out in such a short period of time. And people are convinced. So when I looked at the voting, it was actually quite funny. It wasn't like there was a huge difference. There was Eduardo getting about 40. The others were like 35. The second one was like, 30. So they were all good. It's just that he
Mm.
excelled in telling his story.
What are the big, let's say, mistakes that people coming in to tell their story? What do they need to overcome to really get that perfect story?
I think couple of them is never memorize it. It should really come from here. People also get a bit nervous, especially if they're introverts speaking to an audience because they're like, oh my God, there's so many people here, nobody that I know. So in some of those things, I'm like, please don't memorize it. Just practice. It should come from your heart. Put in a lot of emotion into it. If it's something you're passionate about, it's going to come through. Don't worry about it. And if they're a little bit shy, I say, just look at me. Look at me and tell me that story. I'll stand right there and I'll look at you. Forget everyone else that's around you. And last time there was a lady and she was super nervous, and I sat with her in the toilet and I held her hand and we went through it a couple of times and she was okay after that and she did a great job. But it just depends on people to people, right? And it also helps that when you give them a warm welcome and you give them some encouragement, I think it's really just about people, right? They can have great ideas, but sometimes they doubt themselves when they come in front of such a big audience. And when they have come out of the other end, they realize it actually wasn't so bad. I got my value proposition in 99 seconds. I did it in front of a big crowd. I overcame my fear. So I think other than just getting their idea out there, they felt really good about themselves. And that's important, right? As an entrepreneur, because sometimes the journey can be quite lonely and you're not sure. A lot of people are not that encouraging, especially when you go in front of VCs. You
Mm.
talk to them and they're like, yeah, that was great, but I don't think I'll invest in you. So, if I can do a little thing in which I can say that, hey, look, forget the VC. There was 65 people in there that thought you had a great idea.
And beyond the pitch event, you've mentored, I think it's like 4 or 5 different organizations.
Yeah.
What do you see as the big challenge for entrepreneurs to be successful? What's the thing that just keeps repeating itself and you kind of help them get over it?
I tell myself, because someone just asked me the question the other day, because it's actually really simple things. And if they had figured it out, then I wouldn't have, I wouldn't do what I do, right? So one of the key things is when you're so close to the service of the product, you just tend to have a very silo view. You don't see outside. I give that devil's advocate. I question them. I sort of every assumption they made, I'm like, are you sure about this? Let's talk about this. Let's break this down. Also, sometimes I've seen that a lot of CEOs that are startup CEOs are not scale up CEOs. They work really well with a small team, but when they're looking to sort of expand globally, they just don't have that mindset. The other thing is, when they come into a new market, it's just holding on to the idea they had. A lot of the New Zealand companies I work with, New Zealand is a very small country. It's also very they don't hustle as much, quite slow. When they came to Singapore, everything was moving so fast and they were so close to their product. They didn't want to change anything. They're like, no, this is me. I built it like this. But Singaporeans don't think like that. Internationally, they also don't think like that. So maybe tweak it a little bit, put this here, put that there. So I think biggest failures would be you have a great idea. Can you execute on it when you're going globally and to different markets? Now, if I was just helping a startup in one market, maybe my job would not be that hard. But when they're looking to scale globally, it is thinking differently, being able to scale, being able to implement the changes and to do it fast. Because I only work with technology companies. It is not an agri-tech. We're waiting for everything, the building to come up. Here, if you're not successful in 12 to 18 months in getting a deal flow, getting customers, having some partnership, it's very likely that you run out of money. And a VC or someone who's willing to invest in you say, what did you do in the last 18 months? You burn through all the cash and you don't even have a single customer. So my job, I feel, is to sort of make sure that they can get through this process and actually start making money in the first 12 to 18 months.
You talked about the difference between kind of a local operation and scaling globally. What's the shift in the mindset that these founders need to have?
So there's a few things. One of them is they have a term in New Zealand, and a lot of them are trying to adapt it now, is think global from day one, right?
Mm.
Because the market that you're in, if you start from thinking that I'll only do it in this market, you'll not be able to scale. So from day one, you're thinking, what is my exit plan? Now, exit plan doesn't
Mm.
have to be, I'm going to give the companies like, am I going to go IPO? Am I going to sell it off? Or am I going to do ABC? One of the things I find about a lot of these startups is when they start the company, there's never an exit plan. That's number one. Exit plan could be me scaling globally and giving my CEO position to someone who can
So,
handle that.
so let me challenge that for a second. Why
Sure.
is the exit plan important? You hear from a lot of famous CEOs, oh, I built this to last. I'm not trying to make a quick buck or turn around. But the exit plan is still incredibly important. Why is that?
Because it means they haven't thought through. Let me start with the negative side. They haven't thought through what would happen if it would fail. They think that it's going to success and it's going to last forever. But if you haven't thought through what could happen if I don't make IPO, if I don't scale globally. So I know it sounds a bit negative, but if you don't plan for failure, then you haven't planned properly. That's number one. The second one is that you need to have an exit plan, because if you don't, and the exit doesn't mean, I'm going to leave the company. It could be, I'll just take a step back and give it, and I'll be part of the board, or I will go IPO, or I'll do a joint venture or whatever. You need to have that strategy, because a startup is never going to be a startup forever. It's going to be a scale up, and then it's going to be a huge growth company at some point. So you need to have that ambition. As some people say that, look, I just want to leave it a boutique company, really small. How many boutique companies survive unless they've done a partnership? In my opinion, a lot of companies that I've worked with that have stayed boutique have not survived. They have failed in 3 to 5 years. And this is just from my experience. So I tell them that you need to have this plan. Think of a partnership. Think of, maybe giving up this position to someone else, or think of, some other exit, but you have to have that, because remaining a very small company is just not going to work, especially in this day and age. Yeah.
What's the difference? You're alluding to that there's a difference between the kind of the startup CEO and the scale up CEO. What is that difference? Is it just experience and knowledge, or is there something more fundamental?
There's a couple of things. So, and it's not always the case, because you have successful ones that actually can start navigating and thinking differently. But the startup CEOs I've seen is that they are so close and so attached to the idea that they've produced, that it's their baby, that they're
Mm.
not willing to shift and think of a different business model. They're not willing to shift and think of customize the product to different things. And when they start scaling, they feel like they're losing control. So they try to be quite centralized and have a lot of say in every decision. So it becomes a bottleneck. They don't like, okay, I'll give you, okay, Singapore becomes a different entity. You run with it as long as you're making money. They don't do that. So if they were to think differently and say, hey, you know what? It's okay. I would be happy to delegate the responsibility to all the different markets as long as they report back and make certain amount of revenue in a certain. Yes, I'm willing to customize it to different markets. If they do that, yes, then they're good startup and scale up CEOs. If they can't, then they need to sort of, give it up to someone. If I could just give you an example, I work with this company, and now he had to step back, but he was a brilliant man, and he comes from a background in AI. He created something called the Soul Machines. They were the first company in New Zealand that sort of came up with a digital human that looked so real that you wouldn't even know. And to sort of prove that point, what they did was they created a digital human baby. And you would interact and we think, is this a real human, or is this a AI machine? Because they use eyes, the facial expressions and everything to sort of mimic. And he was so close to that when they started expanding and saying, we want it in airlines, we want it in beauty shops, all these other things, he goes, no, I just created to sort of show that we could replicate AI in the space. So eventually, by the board, he was pushed out, which is a bit sad for him, but he just wasn't thinking differently. Now, they just recently raised 40 million in the US, and they are
Oh, wow.
expanding globally. Yeah, if you can look them up, they're doing amazingly well. But when they first started off, Greg Cross, who was the CEO, is no longer the CEO of the company, because he just didn't want to let go of that little, not baby, literally his product and service that he created.
And let me ask you this. The entrepreneurial journey can be difficult. The way I describe it as myself, an entrepreneur many times over, is bipolar disease. One day you're on the top of the world, you're happy. Another day it's the worst day in the world,
Yeah,
fully depressed. It's a hard journey.
it is.
You also lose people. I don't think I've spoken to a single CEO who hasn't lost relationships through the journey. Happened to myself as well. Would you recommend your children to be entrepreneurs?
Yes, absolutely. And I'll tell you why. So this has probably been the hardest and the most learn steepest learning curve for me. You know, when you work, and I worked really hard when I was younger for HSBC, and I worked long hours, 18-hour days and things like that. But here, I'm doing it intentionally. No one's pushing me to do it. It is also very lonely, and you doubt yourself many times. So when you come out of the other end, you're like, you know what? If I lose everything, I know what I'm capable of. If, I had to do, even though I learned it in booth, I hate accounting. I had to do accounting. I had to do my books. I had to learn how to create a website. I had to sort of create a business model from scratch and with no validation for anything. And when customers ask me, "Oh, can you bring down your price? Can you change your business model?" I questioned myself, but then I had to create that confidence. I know that a lot of entrepreneurs go through this, and I'm a sole entrepreneur. I had someone in the beginning when I started off with him, and he was really, really great, but he has some visa issues and he had to leave. Also, the other thing is you really become very conscious of your time. What are the most important things? It's your company, it's your family, it's your other things in life. So you become very discerning with who you spend time with. I love meeting with people that energize me, the people that, either give me ideas or they're in the same mindset as me. When I was working for some of these big companies, of course, I would work, it was 9 to 5 job, and then I would meet with a bunch of people, and I don't want it to come across as negative, but I would meet with a lot of superficial people. They're like, "Oh, you're going to the mall, or you want to go, clubbing, blah, blah, blah." Now, when I meet someone, I'm like, "Oh, what's your next big idea? What's happening there? Let's talk about something that's mentally stimulating." And I love it. I don't mind the shift. So I did lose people from, also when my companies sort of went from a two-man team to working with fractional CEOs to now being a lot smaller. But I also lost my circle of, I don't know if you would call acquaintances or friends, because I think differently now. And it's not a bad thing. I was a bit sad in the beginning, but then I'm like, it's okay. People go through these changes, and I'm in a different person in a different space right now. And I get energy from different things. And when I have doubts, I look at what I've accomplished as opposed to when I was working with a huge team of Marcoms and stuff. Now I do my own marketing, which I do organically. I do my own business models, my own contracts and everything. And it gives you incredible amount of confidence because no one can take that away. No company, who's going to fire me? I'll fire myself. But if I want to, and if I want to change a job, right? So it is something which is in here and I love it. And I would encourage my kids to do it because you take that with you, you can do anything.
Yeah.
Actually, my son, when he was in school, started his own company. It was a cute little company because it was under me on fitness because he was doing all this stuff on fitness and he would create these blogs. He created a nutrition plan. I was his first guinea pig. So he goes, "You should do these workouts, this and the other." And he created all these videos on how to do the right form. And I said, "Why are you doing this?" He goes, "Oh, because I really enjoy it. I want to try doing podcasts a bit like you. And I want to do all this nutrition stuff to tell people what are the macros they need to take." Of course, now he doesn't have much time, but at least he started it out when he was 18. And he did it for 2 years when he was going through his high school.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Would you agree that actually taking the entrepreneurial journey as early as possible in life is actually has the most advantages because you have the least amount of risk?
Yes, that's true. There's two sides to it, right? So I've seen, really young people do that and they are fearless and, they have a lot of energy, but also I think sometimes they can be a bit cocky.
Mm,
So, they're like, "Oh, I can do this, I can do that." And they don't really respect some of the things that has built this industry, right? They're
mm,
like, "We can do anything." Now, if you have the grit and if you have a great team around you and if you've got the money, very likely, you will succeed, right? But then I've seen entrepreneurs that are, and I've worked with a few, again, I'm going back to really working with these New Zealand companies. This guy, he was in his late 20s. He started an AI chatbot for InsurTech. And, he's like, "I can do anything. Look at me. I've got such a massive background. I've been so successful and everything." He got really cocky. And yeah, eventually, it failed during the COVID period. But those who are slightly older and have been through the ups and downs of life tend to have more resilience. And they think, okay, we're not going to fight it. We're going to be like a bamboo. We're going to go through the tides of life and we're going to be flexible through it. And we are going to be also humble. I think the best combination of CEOs, not it's not really the age, it's the mentality. Am I sort of, do I have a growth mindset? Am I willing to learn? Do I have a humble nature? And while these don't actually line up with a lot of the CEOs, you see, they come across as arrogant, they come across as whatever. I think those are more important. And the biggest ones, soft skills, are things like empathy and actually listening to your customers, right? A lot of people are like, I've got this great product. Why won't they like it? Well, you're not really, solving their problem.
Yeah,
So
I
I,
couldn't
I don't
agree
really
more.
see age as a problem. I
Yeah.
see it more as your mentality, not so much as an age thing. I've seen young people being really mature while also maintaining that humble and growth mindset.
I would argue that, trying to follow in the footsteps of Steve Jobs or Bill Gates is probably a recipe for disaster. That level of arrogance of you're going to save the world is not how 90% of the successful entrepreneurs actually behaved through their success. So I think we get kind of enamored with these celebrities is really what they are, right? Elon Musk, etc. And like, oh, I'm
Yeah.
going to be Elon Musk, but that's really not what success looks like.
No.
Again, in the 99% of the cases. I will say that I do advise youngsters, of course, to be humble, but being a entrepreneur at an early stage, if you, in 1 year of corporate work and in 1 year of entrepreneurial work, you will learn 10 times more as an entrepreneur.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So it's even if you fail, and of course I hope that you don't, you're going to come out of that next as an individual. So there's always that silver lining.
No, absolutely. Actually, my younger son, who's still in school right now, I've encouraged him and he's thinking about it. He's going to do a gap year and just work, just do these, little things, not entrepreneurship, but just work. And the reason I want him to do that instead of going straight to university is because I want him to understand the value of money. I want him to understand, what the workforce is like. Because some
Yeah.
people just go straight from the high school to university, then maybe try to do a master's. And when they come out, they're like, oh, look, I've got all this education, but it's all just theoretical. You actually haven't done anything. So whether he takes an entrepreneurship during that gap year or he actually goes and, tries different types of work, I think being there, absolutely right. Whether you fail or you're successful, being there and actually trying it out is something very important. I wish I could have taken it sooner, this entrepreneurship journey, but it's also maybe a female thing. And, the background that I come from, we tend to be quite perfectionists and we also have like this imposter syndrome. It doesn't matter how educated we are. It took me a good 20 years to realize, I can do this. Because I think entrepreneurs are incredibly, have a lot of courage because, you're like, okay, I've had the safety net of all this and now I'm putting it all aside. I'm believing in myself and what I'm going to do and take the leap of faith. Whereas young people don't really have all that. And they're like, oh, well, I don't have any money to start with. I might as well take the leap of faith now and see what happens, as long as their parents will take them back into the garage, when they fail.
It's there's definitely something magical about not having a mortgage, not having to feed kids, not having
I know.
all these responsibilities.
Absolutely.
Sharmin, what an absolute joy to have you on the show. This has been so much fun. We have just one question. It's a hard one because it's personal,
Ooh,
but it's the only
okay.
scripted question we have on the show. If you had to go back to the hardest points in your life, whether it was 2 years, 5 years, or 20 years ago, what advice would you give yourself?
My hardest period was actually very, very personal. And it was a very difficult period for my family. So it's not about work. And, at the time, I sort of just went into survival mode and just put my head down. I think the advice I would have given is, this is just passing. Everything goes through, phases. I was incredibly hard on myself. I almost went through a burnout. I was working really hard while I was also having this, family issues, my father and all these other things. And I didn't take a moment to really take on and appreciate the stuff I was learning, take time with my family. I just put my head down and just did. When I look back now, I learned it really changed my mindset after that. I learned a lot, but I sort of sacrificed some time with my family and, I'm never going to have that back. So I think my advice would be that, when you go through these times, you tell yourself, what's the most important thing right now? And will you get it back? And this is just passing. No one stays in that. There is dark moments and there is not so dark moments. So just go through this and I'm sure there's a light at the end of the tunnel.
Sharmin, thank you so much for joining the show today. This was a true pleasure.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. This has been so much fun.